Arizona Territory, August 1880. The sun was bleeding orange into the dust when I saw her. We were 5 men crossing a dry wash, horses crusted in salt and silence. Not one of us expected anything but another stretch of heat. Then the wind shifted, and there she was, stumbling out of the sagebrush like a ghost cracked open. She didn't cry out, just walked, barefoot, limping, dress torn at the side and soaked in blood. Her hand was pressed to her belly, fingers sticky and trembling. Her dark curls hung in a tangled curtain down her back, face pale as bone, mouth slack with pain. "Jesus," Jack muttered beside me, tugging his reins. "That woman's been shot." We slowed. No one moved. Somewhere behind me, one of the boys turned his horse. I never looked to see who. I just swung down. My boots hit the dust hard. She was maybe 20 paces ahead, still moving, but just barely. One foot dragging like her body hadn't got the message to fall yet. I walked straight to her. Not fast, not slow, just steady. She looked at me once, didn't speak, just folded like paper in my arms. Her blood was hot through my shirt. I didn't ask questions, just carried her back to the creek, down under the cottonwoods where we watered the horses. I barked for my canteen. Someone handed it over. She was shaken now. Shallow breaths, eyes rolling back, fingers curled into my collar like maybe I was the last solid thing in the world. I laid her down gentle, cut the laces of her bodice, and found the hole just above her left hip. A bullet had torn through, messy but not deep. She was lucky, or maybe cursed. Hard to tell in this country. She came to while I was cleaning the wound. Tried to sit up, teeth gritted. "You're all right," I said, pressing her back. "Hold still." "My kids," she rasped. Her lips were cracked, voice dry as stone. They took my babies." "Who did?" Her eyes fluttered. "Wagon. Men on horses. Ellen. Elijah." Then her head rolled sideways and she was out again. We built a fire, boiled water. Maria, Jack's sister, tore linen for bandages while I cleaned the wound with whiskey. The woman's breath hitched at every touch, but she didn't scream, just clenched her jaw and kept breathing. Hours passed. Shadows stretched long, the sky turning violet behind the ridge. I sat beside her, feeding her sips of water when she stirred, changing the cloth when it soaked through. She didn't have a ring, just a leather string around her neck with a small bone charm. Looked like a child's carving. When the others bedded down, I stayed up, watching her chest rise and fall. My shirt was stiff with dried blood. I didn't sleep. Not when a woman was shot and her children taken, and the others just rode on like it was someone else's tragedy. I didn't know her name, I didn't know her story, but I knew this much. Whatever had happened out there in the scrub, she hadn't given up, so neither would I. She thrashed through the night like her body was fighting something invisible. I sat by the fire, a pot of boiled water steaming beside me, cloth in one hand and a Colt in the other. Her fever climbed high, skin clammy, cheeks flushed with heat. Every so often she'd stir, mumble words that had the weight of truth, even if they were broken. "Elijah, don't cry, baby." Her hand reached out, fingers curling toward nothing. I took it, held it steady. "Ellen, stay down. You hear me? Don't run, please. Don't run." It tore at me. I've heard dying men babble about women and whiskey, but there's something different about a mother's voice when she thinks no one's listening. It's raw,
pure. She kept saying, "my babies," like the words alone could bring them back. When the fire dipped low, I added more wood. When her brow glistened, I wiped it with a damp cloth. Somewhere past midnight, she opened her eyes and looked at me like she didn't know where she was. "You're safe," I said. "I'm Fletcher Ward. You're under cottonwoods by a stream. You were shot." She blinked slow. "Where are they?" "Who?" "My children." Her voice cracked like a dry branch. "My boy, Elijah. My girl, Ellen. They took 'em." "Who took them?" She winced as she tried to sit. I steadied her. She didn't answer right away, just looked out into the dark, eyes wide and haunted. "3 men," she whispered. "One had a red scarf. Another had a bad cough. They stopped a wagon, said they needed water. I should have known, should have seen it." Her voice broke. I waited. "They hit him first. Mitch, my husband. He fell. They dragged me out. One held my arms. I kicked, bit. Then I heard Ellen scream. That's when he shot me." She pressed her hand to her side, over the bandage. "I must have crawled. I don't know how long. I just kept thinking, if I die, they'll be alone." "You won't die," I said. "You don't know that." "I do." She looked away. "Where's your husband now?" She swallowed. "They left him. Mitch is dead." Silence settled between us like a heavy coat. "I'm going to find your children," I said. She looked back at me. "Why?" "Because someone should." Her eyes shimmered. Whether it was tears or fever sweat, I couldn't tell. She nodded once and whispered, "Georgia. My name's Georgia." I stayed up the rest of the night. Before dawn cracked the sky, I made a promise to her sleeping form and the quiet world around us. I would find Elijah and Ellen. Not just because it was right, but because Georgia hadn't given up. And neither would I.
Maria's place sat a half-day's ride west, whitewashed adobe with blue shutters and chickens scratching around the yard. When we rode in, Georgia slumped against my chest, barely conscious. Her fever had broken just after sunrise, but she was weak, bones like kindling, skin cold despite the sun. Maria didn't ask questions. She saw the way I held Georgia and just nodded, ushering us inside like she'd been waiting. The house smelled like rosemary and wood smoke. We laid Georgia in a clean bed, and I sat by her side while Maria heated broth and boiled fresh linen. She woke mid-afternoon. Her lips were less cracked, her voice steadier. I helped her sit up to eat. She sipped slow, the spoon shaking a little in my hand. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me yet." We sat in quiet, the ticking of a wall clock, a dog barking somewhere far off. Then she looked at me sideways. "I know you." I raised a brow. "Do you?"
You bought peaches from me, summer before last, outside Winslow, my stand by the rail fence. You ticked your hat and paid in silver." I smiled, surprised. "I remember that. You had a little girl asleep in a basket under the table." She smiled back, faint but real. "That was Ellen." The silence that followed was softer somehow, familiar, like we'd met again, not for the first time. Later, when Maria stepped out to fetch more salve, Georgia spoke again, voice low. "Mitch was good to me once, before the fever took his patience." I said nothing, just kept stirring the fire. "He lost work, blamed God, blamed me. When I told him we should move west, he cursed me. Then got sick, died under a wool blanket, cursing the world." She looked away. "I'm not telling you this for pity. I'm telling you so you know I didn't have much left to lose." I nodded slowly. "Now you've got 2 kids missing and a bullet wound to show for it. And a man making promises he might not keep." I looked her dead in the eye. "I keep mine." She stared at me a long time, then reached out, her hand warm now, calloused from hard work. She didn't grip mine, just rested her fingers there, like saying yes without needing the words. I said it anyway. "We will find your children." That was the moment something shifted. Not just between us, but inside me. I hadn't had anyone to fight for in a long while. Not since my younger brother died and my father drank himself silent. Not since I'd walked away from the ranch and started drifting place to place like a man looking for a storm to die in. But now, sitting in a quiet room with a woman who remembered me from a peach stand, I found something I didn't know I'd lost. A reason. By morning, Georgia was out on the porch wrapped in a quilt, a cup of Maria's coffee in her hands. She looked steadier, pale still, but the fire was back in her eyes. I came up the steps with dust on my boots and news on my tongue. "They headed north," I said, settling into the rocking chair beside her. "2 boys in town saw a busted wagon heading toward the rim. One said he saw a girl with a ribbon in her hair and a boy who limped on the left." Ellen's breath caught. "Ellen's got a limp when she's tired. Twisted her ankle last spring." "They also said the girl had something shiny round her neck." She closed her eyes. Her locket, my mama's. I watched her hand tighten on the cup, knuckles white. A bird sang somewhere in the juniper trees, oblivious to the weight in her chest. "I'm coming with you," she said. I expected it. I didn't welcome it. "You're still healing." I rode 5 weeks in a wagon through the desert, got shot, crawled miles to live. I'm not staying behind while someone else saves my kids. Her voice was even, not loud, like she'd already made peace with the pain and was ready to walk through it. "I'm not saying you ain't strong," I said. "I'm saying strong folks die too when they rush in still bleeding. I'd rather die moving forward than sit here waiting." I leaned forward, elbows on knees. "My mother tried to fight off a man who came for our land. She held a rifle with shaking hands. She said the same thing you just did." Georgia tilted her head. "He beat her, left her with a busted jaw and a memory that made her flinch when a chair scraped wrong. I was 15. Took me 6 years to find the man who did it, but I did." Her eyes softened, not with pity, but understanding. "I ain't trying to cage you," I said. "I just don't want to lose you before we find him." She studied me a long while, then reached out and placed her hand over mine. "You're not the only one who can keep a promise." I exhaled, nodded. "All right then, we ride at first light." Deal. Later, I packed 2 rifles, extra water, and what Maria could spare. Georgia helped with the saddlebags, wincing when she moved too fast, but never stopping. We weren't partners in name, but we were something close, something forged in blood, pain, and the shared refusal to quit. That night, we sat by the edge of the house watching the stars come out. "I used to think no one would come for me," she said quietly. "Not Mitch, not anyone. I stopped hoping." I looked over. Hope's stubborn, just needs someone to give it a reason. She smiled at that, a small one, but real. In that moment, I knew. This wasn't mercy. This was purpose.
We rode north with the sun at our backs, and the rim like a jagged promise in the distance. The country changed as we climbed. Saguaros gave way to juniper. The air cooled, and the trail turned narrow and winding. Georgia rode with quiet grit. A hand pressed now and then to her side, but her back stayed straight, and her eyes stayed sharp. We didn't talk much. The silence between us wasn't empty. It was steady, like the breathing of something shared. Midday of the second day, I spotted it, a fresh trail. Wagon tracks shallow in the dust, veering off the main path. I dismounted and knelt beside him. "Light wheels," I said. "Not much weight in the back." "Could be empty," Georgia said. "Could be carrying kids." She knelt beside me. I pointed to a broken twig, one end with a trace of pink cloth fluttering in the breeze. Georgia's breath hitched. She reached for it with trembling fingers. "Ellen's dress." The wind gusted, dry and warm, but the cold was in our bones now. This was real. They were close. "We make camp here tonight," I said. "Trail's not more than a day old. We'll move faster without spooking them." That night, by a mesquite fire, Georgia stared into the flames like they held all the answers. I handed her a tin of beans. "Eat." She shook her head. "Not hungry. You'll eat anyway. You ride weak, you die. Simple." She managed to smirk at that. "Bossy. A live bossy's better than dead stubborn." She laughed and sighed. "You ever lose someone, Fletcher?" "Plenty." "Anyone you were supposed to protect?" I looked into the dark. Thought of my brother, Levi. 10 years old. Drowned in a flash flood I should have seen coming. "Yeah, and I carry it still." She nodded like she understood that weight exactly. Then, without looking at me, she said, "If we don't find them, we will." "But if we don't, we will," I repeated, firm, final. She blinked fast. "You sound so sure." "Because I have to be. Because you can't afford me not being." She looked at me then, long and quiet. At dawn, we rode hard. The trail wound up into rockier terrain, pinyon pines and broken stone. We crested a rise and saw smoke, thin and silver, curling from somewhere down in the canyon. I pulled the spyglass from my saddlebag and scanned. There, a lean-to, a crippled wagon, 3 horses, but no kids in sight. "They're there," I said, "but this next part won't be quiet." George's hand drifted to her revolver. "Good. I'm done being quiet."
The ravine was deep and crooked, one of those natural traps God etched into the land with no thought for maps. The wagon sat crumpled between 2 rocks, its rear axle snapped and tarpaulin flapping loose. Smoke rose from a crude fire pit. 3 men lounged nearby, one on a stump sharpening a knife, another asleep under a hat, and the last pacing, chewing on a strip of jerky. No children in sight. "They could be inside the lean-to," I whispered, handing Georgia the spyglass. She scanned slow. "I don't see 'em, but there's a tin plate with small bites left. Someone's feeding someone little." I nodded. "They're here." We backed off the ridge and made a plan. I'd ride in first, slow, with a trader's lie and a whiskey bottle. Georgia would circle around high, eyes on the lean-to and a rifle ready. I rode in like I belonged there. My face was sun-baked, clothes trailed dirty, and I kept my hands open. "Howdy," I called out. "I ain't looking for trouble, just a drink and maybe trade for firewood." The one with the knife looked up. The sleeper didn't stir. The third man stepped forward, jerky still in hand. "Ain't much to trade." I raised the bottle. "I've got Kentucky Brown." That got a twitch of interest. Then I set it, like tossing a hook into still water. "Looking for a couple kids. Saw tracks up the trail, thought maybe you'd seen a boy with a limp and a girl wearing a silver locket." That was the moment it turned. The man with the knife stood up slow. The one who'd been napping suddenly wasn't. The air thickened like a storm was about to break. "Why you askin'?" Knife Man said. I swung down slow. "Because I'm here for the children." And then all hell let loose. The one with the jerky rushed me. I sidestepped, drove my elbow into his ribs. The knife flashed, caught me across the sleeve, but not the skin. I grappled, threw, rolled. Dust choked the air. A gunshot cracked from above. One man screamed. His leg buckled. Georgia had taken her first shot. The knife man lunged again, but I caught his wrist, turned, and slammed the butt of my Colt into his jaw. He dropped like a sack of wheat. The last man, wounded and panicked, bolted toward the lean-to. "Georgia!" I shouted. Another shot. The man spun and fell hard, skidding in the dust, moaning but alive. I ran past him, tore the flap of the lean-to open, and there they were. Two small figures huddled together, filthy and wide-eyed. Ellen clutched her locket in one hand, and Elijah had a scrape on his cheek. But they were breathing, alive. Georgia was already running down the slope, rifle still in hand, face twisted between fury and fear. She hit her knees beside them, scooped them both up, sobbing into their hair. Ellen clung to her, whispering, "Mama, Mama," over and over. I backed away, letting the moment be hers. Behind me, the wounded men groaned, but I didn't care. Not right then. We'd come through fire and stone and blood, and we'd won. We camped that night by the Verde, under cottonwoods thick with cicada song. The children curled together beneath George's blanket, asleep before the stars fully showed themselves. Ellen still clutched her locket, and Elijah held a stick like it might keep the night away. I stoked the fire low and handed Georgia a tin cup of coffee. She didn't drink it, just held it in both hands and stared into the flames. "I thought they'd forget me," she said after a long silence. "Kids, they forget things fast." I didn't know what to say. Not yet. I used to sing to Ellen every night, same song. And when she saw me today, she said the words to it like it was yesterday, like nothing had broken. Her voice cracked. She wiped her eyes hard with the back of her wrist. "They didn't forget," I said quietly. She looked at me. "But I did." "Did what?" "I forgot who I was. Somewhere between being Mitch's wife and a mother on the trail, I stopped being someone I'd recognize. I let him talk me small, let the days blur together till I was just moving forward, because stopping meant death." I watched the fire dance in her eyes. "You're not that anymore," I said. "I don't even know what comes next." I took a slow sip. I don't either. But I know I'm not going back to what I was. She studied me. "What were you?" "A man who let too many things go without a fight. A man who never stayed long enough for anything to root." Georgia set down the cup. "You stayed for me." "I did." The children stirred beside the fire. Elijah coughed once. Ellen rolled toward her brother.
Georgia turned to them, her hand drifting to brush a curl from her daughter's forehead. "They're all I have. You've got me," I said. She went still. "No deaths, no pity, just me. If you want that." She looked at me a long time, long enough for me to wonder if I'd said the wrong thing. Then, quietly, she shifted beside me, leaned her head against my shoulder, and whispered, "I do." We sat like that, side by side, listening to the fire pop and the river move. I didn't know where we'd go. Pine Hollow, maybe, or further west. But wherever it was, I'd ride there with her. Not as a savior, but as someone saved.
Pine Hollow wasn't much. A dusty crossroads with a mercantile, a smithy, and one church bell that rang late on Sundays. But it was enough. Martha took us in. She'd known Georgia's mother years back and remembered her as a woman too sharp for her station. Georgia traded chores for beds, and I found work fixing fence posts and hauling freight for the livery. The town didn't quite know what to make of us. Some looked kindly, others kept their distance. "Let 'em look," Georgia said one morning as she swept the porch outside the mercantile. "I've lived through worse than a sideways glance." Ellen helped sort beans, and Elijah followed me everywhere, asking about horses and how to hold a rifle. He still limped a little, but I made sure he had boots that fit and a stick carved smooth like a marshal's cane. We found rhythms, quiet ones. I rose early, rode out, came back dusty. Georgia baked cornbread. The children laughed more and asked fewer questions. But even peace has shadows. One day at the well, a woman asked Georgia if she was Mrs. Ward now. Georgia smiled, polite. "Not yet." That night she brought it up by lamplight. "You planning on leaving?" "No." "Then what are we waiting for?" I blinked. "I don't want promises in the dark," she said, voice steady. "I want a life I chose." I stood up, walked to her, took her hands. "I'd marry you right now in the dust if you'd let me." She smiled. "There's an oak behind the chapel. I'd settle for that." 2 days later we said our vows beneath it. Just us, the preacher, and the kids. Ellen with flowers in her hair, Elijah holding the ring with both hands like it might shatter. Georgia wore a borrowed dress and looked stronger than any woman I'd ever known. I couldn't stop smiling. After, we sat on the porch at Martha's, hands twined together, watching the sun dip behind the hills. "I never thought I'd feel safe again," she whispered. "You're not just safe, you're home." She leaned her head on my shoulder, same as she had by the fire that night by the Verde. Only now there was no blood, no fever, no fear. Just a woman, her children, and the man who didn't ride past. We built something quiet, honest, and every day I thank God I stepped down from that saddle when I did.